March 28, 1941. The morning mist rises from the river Ouse as a solitary figure walks toward the water's edge. She is Virginia Woolf, one of literature's greatest voices, but today she carries stones in her coat pockets and despair in her heart. Behind her, on the mantelpiece at Monk's house, lies a letter that will break her husband's heart and reveal her final torment. "I feel certain I am going mad again," she has written, her elegant handwriting masking decades of inner turmoil and brilliant creativity. This is not just a story of a suicide, but the tale of a genius whose mind was both her greatest gift and cruelest enemy. For 59 years, she had battled the demons that whispered of death while creating literature that celebrated the complexity of human consciousness. This is Virginia Woolf, the woman who revolutionized how we think and write, while fighting a war inside her own brilliant, tormented mind. Born Virginia Stephen in 1882 into London's intellectual elite, she was the daughter of Sir Leslie Stephen, a prominent Victorian critic and philosopher. Her childhood at 22 Hyde Park Gate was filled with books, ideas, and the expectation that she would become something extraordinary in literary circles. But beneath the privileged surface, darkness lurked as from age 13. Following her mother's death, Woolf suffered periodic mood swings that would define her life. Virginia Woolf's parents also suffered from mental disorders. Her father was cyclothymic, whereas her mother suffered from depression, creating a genetic legacy of brilliance and instability. The Victorian era offered no understanding of mental illness, treating her episodes as feminine hysteria rather than the serious condition they represented. Her half-brothers George and Gerald Duckworth sexually abused her during adolescence, trauma that would haunt her relationships with men throughout her life. These early violations taught her that her body was not her own, that safety could be shattered without warning by those men to protect. The death of her beloved mother Julia in 1895 triggered Virginia's first major mental breakdown, a pattern of loss and collapse that would repeat. She threw herself into reading and writing as escape from the suffocating expectations of Victorian womanhood and the chaos inside her head. Her father's death in 1904 liberated the Stephen children from Hyde Park Gate, allowing them to move to the Bohemian Bloomsbury district. In Bloomsbury, Virginia discovered intellectual freedom among artists and writers who challenged conventional morality and embraced experimental ideas about art and life. The Bloomsbury Group became her chosen family. E.M. Forster, Lytton Strachey, John Maynard Keynes, and other brilliant minds who valued her intelligence over her gender. But even surrounded by supportive friends, the demons in her head whispered constantly, alternating between paralyzing depression and manic creative energy. Her life being divided into periods of paralyzing depression and extreme mania, often accompanied by psychotic episodes, making stability impossible to achieve. She began writing professionally in 1905, contributing reviews to the Times literary supplement while struggling to control the voices in her head. Her first novel, The Voyage Out, took 7 years to complete as she battled perfectionism, self-doubt, and recurring episodes of mental illness. Each creative breakthrough came at enormous psychological cost, as if her genius demanded payment in suffering and periods of complete mental breakdown. In 1912, she married Leonard Woolf, a brilliant political writer who understood her condition and devoted his life to protecting her from it. Leonard became her anchor in the storm, recognizing the signs of approaching breakdowns and creating structured routines to help her manage her condition. Their marriage was unconventional, sexless, but deeply loving, built on intellectual partnership and his unwavering commitment to preserving her sanity and creativity. He monitored her sleep, diet, and work schedule with the precision of a doctor, knowing that disruption could trigger episodes lasting weeks or months. Together, they founded the Hogarth Press in 1917, giving Virginia complete creative control while Leonard managed a business and protected her from stress. The press published her experimental novels that traditional publishers rejected, allowing her to develop the stream of consciousness technique that revolutionized modern literature. Mrs. Dalloway, published in 1925, captured the flow of human thought with unprecedented psychological realism, showing how memory and perception shape reality. To the Lighthouse followed in 1927, exploring themes of loss, time, and the creative process while experimenting with narrative structure and temporal shifts. The Waves in 1931 pushed literary boundaries even further, creating a poetic meditation on consciousness and identity that defied conventional novel form. But each masterpiece extracted its price as Virginia struggled with the gap between her artistic ambitions and her psychological limitations. After periods when she was paralyzed by depression, withdrawn from human contact, when horror and terror made her long for death, she questioned whether to avoid these glooms. She wrote in her diary about the strange relationship between her illness and creativity, wondering if her breakdowns were necessary for her art. The 1930s brought increasing political awareness as she wrote A Room of One's Own, exploring women's need for independence and creative space. Three Guineas followed, connecting women's oppression to the rise of fascism, showing how personal and political liberation were inseparable in her thinking. But as World War II approached, her mental state deteriorated under the pressure of living through another devastating conflict after the trauma of The Blitz brought constant fear as bombs fell on London, while Virginia struggled with the familiar signs of approaching breakdown. She completed her final novel, Between the Acts, while fighting increasing despair and the certainty that her mind was failing again. Leonard recognized the warning signs: insomnia, voices, the terrible clarity that preceded her darkest episodes, but felt helpless to prevent the inevitable. On March 18, 1941, she wrote in her diary, "L. is doing the rhododendrons. We have been happy," not knowing these would be among her last words. 10 days later, she walked to the river Ouse near their home, filled her coat pockets with stones, and stepped into the water. Leonard discovered Virginia's final letter on the sitting room mantelpiece after realizing she was missing, finding her walking stick by the riverbank. "I feel certain I am going mad again. I feel we can't go through another of those terrible times," she had written with devastating honesty. The letter continued, "I can't go on spoiling your life any longer. I do and think two people could have been happier than we have been, love and despair intertwined." Her body was not found until 18 April. 3 weeks later, discovered by children playing near the river in the Sussex countryside. Leonard had a stone engraved with the last lines from The Waves: "Against you I fling myself, unvanquished and unyielding, O death." Her death at 59 silenced one of literature's most innovative voices, but her influence on modern writing had already become immortal. She had revolutionized the novel form, showing that fiction could capture the full complexity of human consciousness rather than simply telling stories. Her feminist essays influenced generations of women writers, arguing that creativity required both financial independence and physical space free from interruption. She proved that mental illness could coexist with genius, that the same sensitivity that made her vulnerable also made her art transcendent. Today, experts think she had bipolar disorder with hypomanic dysphoria and severe depressive phases, conditions that would be treatable now. But in her era, she had only Leonard's love, her own willpower, and the belief that her writing mattered enough to justify the suffering. She transformed personal pain into universal art, showing readers that their inner lives were as complex and worthy as any external adventure. Her stream of consciousness technique influenced countless writers, from James Joyce to contemporary novelists still exploring the mysteries of human thought. The Bloomsbury Groupie's rejection of Victorian moral restrictions helped create the modern literary sensibility that values psychological truth over conventional morality. Her analysis of women's oppression connected personal experience to political theory, laying groundwork for modern feminist thought and continuing gender equality movements. She demonstrated that experimental art could address serious social issues, that innovation in form could serve revolutionary content about women's rights and human consciousness. Her diaries and letters provide intimate portraits of the creative process, showing how great art emerges from the intersection of talent, discipline, and suffering. She refused to let mental illness define her completely, fighting to maintain her identity as a writer even during her darkest episodes. Her marriage to Leonard showed that love could transcend conventional expectations, that partnership could be based on mutual respect rather than traditional roles. She created a new model for the artist's life, proving that women could be serious writers while challenging every assumption about femininity and creativity. Her exploration of time, memory, and perception anticipated modern psychology and neuroscience, showing how subjective experience shapes our understanding of reality. She wrote with unprecedented honesty about depression, suicide, and mental illness at a time when such topics were considered shameful and unmentionable. Her courage in addressing taboo subjects opened doors for future writers to explore their own struggles with mental health and social constraints. She proved that literature could be both aesthetically revolutionary and emotionally truthful, that experimental techniques could serve deep human purposes. The demons that tormented her also fueled her genius, giving her access to psychological depths that more stable minds could not reach. She transformed the novel from entertainment into art form, showing that fiction could be as complex and challenging as poetry or philosophy. Her legacy lives in every writer who believes that inner life matters as much as external action, that consciousness itself is worthy subject matter. She fought her demons with words, creating beauty from suffering and meaning from chaos, proving that art can triumph even over the darkest mental illness. Virginia Woolf died by her own choice, but her genius survived to inspire generations of readers and writers still discovering the revolutionary power of her words. The woman who walked into the river Ouse left behind literature that continues to illuminate the mysteries of human consciousness and the eternal struggle between creation and destruction.